Hello and welcome to Call of Discovery, the podcast where we invite you, yes, you, on a journey into the Crucible for a weekly or fortnightly celebration of all things KeyForge, its community, and of course, the excitement of Discovery. I'm still somehow here. Actually, it is nearly 2 years on as your co-host, Ed Pocock, and I'm joined today, as always, by my good friend, Zach Armstrong. Zach, how are you doing?
I am doing well, Ed. It is good to have you back. I'm surprised that Wild Wormhole wasn't the culprit this time.
It wasn't. It actually wasn't. It was just a busy post-pandemic life, but not too busy to return to the fold. That excitement of Discovery, that lure of Discovery, is too much.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. I've been experiencing myself back in person. Our little play group in Athens, Georgia, has been firing on a regular basis, getting chain bounds every Monday, and it has just been utterly joyful.
And I'm super excited to hear a bit more about it, because today we are going to be talking about your top tips for running a successful KeyForge night in this new world in which we reside, and super excited to kind of get into the details of that.
Yes, me too. I've been able to be kind of the champion for KeyForge in my local area, and I've had some good lessons learned along the way. So I wanted to kind of impart those, and then after the episode, once you hear this, if you have any that you don't hear today, please hit me up on Twitter. Send us an email. All that information will be in the notes below, so we can just share information about how to make these things successful.
So, Zach, of course, I think you're a champion, but how did you become essentially the champion for KeyForge in your local area? For anyone listening thinking, perhaps now it's a new world out there, I can do anything, maybe I want to do that. How did you become that?
Mostly through just being entirely too intense of a person sometimes. But the process is right. So if you are the kind of person who you want to play KeyForge, and you want to play in a group of people playing KeyForge, and you think you could take on the task of putting it together, that's all it takes to be the champion for KeyForge in your area. You need a couple of things. You need to work out what your partnership with the FLGS looks like. It might be they're running the whole thing. It might be the night will only happen if you're volunteering your time. But above all, I think, not worrying about the FLGS, how the tournament or the chainbound or the night is run. I think the biggest thing is wherever KeyForge is going to happen, whether you've made it happen or the FLGS is, you need to make sure there's a champion there every week. And I'm not saying you specifically, although in the early days it will probably be just you. But if you can find somebody with flexible time they don't even need to be outgoing, they just need to be friendly and can welcome people. Just make sure there's somebody like that there every week. To be texting with that person, making sure they're there. I've done that with a local player. When I can't be there, I say, hey, can you go? Can you make sure people feel welcome that night? Just so that there's consistency. There's a familiar face and somebody to welcome people in that night. I would say that is the baseline. The baseline for what you need to be a champion. And I'm going to pause there because did the base come through? A car literally drove by, like shaking my chair with its
It did
base.
Not at all.
It did not. Okay.
I was like, what? What's he doing?
Then I didn't have quite as much confidence, or I didn't have enough confidence in the make of my table and the microphone because
drop the bass.
I could have sworn it would have transferred straight into the mic, but wow, must be a little insulated here. That's lovely. Good job, little table. Good job.
And listeners, I think the episode we did, episode 1, in fact, with guest Steve Broder, who's one of the community organizers here for KeyForge in London, on building a community is still very, very, I'd say, pertinent. A lot of that will resonate very well as a companion episode, I'd say, to the one today.
Yes. And something I will shout out that as I was looking to try to build community, even before I was on as a co-host here, something I stole from that episode was Steve's habit of playing his creatures and artifacts upside down so that a new player can read them, because he's got them all memorized. And if you walk into our little game store, Taiki's Games, on a Monday night, you'll see at least half of the players playing with their cards upside down so that the newer player across from them can read them. So that's kind of been built into our DNA, which also just shows an aura of, of helpfulness, an attitude of helpfulness that a lot of people share, which is just a nice thing to see.
And I don't think we've even spoken about this, Zach, but all of my KeyForge for the past year or so has been upside down, because it's always been in person anyway. It's always been against casual opponents, either my partner or my friends. And with them, I play upside down, and that's just how we play KeyForge. To them, actually, it's not upside down. It's just the right way up. And I think another thing which maybe wasn't such a big factor back then is, of course, making people feel safe in a social environment. Now, we've all come from an interesting year where we've been thrown into lockdowns, and everyone has, I'd say, a different threshold of how they feel safe, particularly going back and re-entering social environments. And that's going to look different depending on where you listener are in the world. But definitely making sure that everyone feels comfortable, or at least knows what to expect within a given environment, is going to be massively important week to week, really, as what people feel about certain things changes over time.
Yeah, and that is something to work with your FLGS on. Something we'll be getting into is just that relationship with your friendly local game store, is what that stands for, in case you're were wondering what I meant there. Because that relationship with a friendly local game store, when it comes to public health and safety and any regulations they must abide by, anything they feel convicted that, hey, we are going to do things this way because this is how we're going to make people feel safe. And so please have your KeyForge night abide by this, whether that's masks or barriers. Just make sure that is clear and communicated, and that however you feel about what the safety implements the store is putting in, like, it's going to be easiest if you want KeyForge. Abide by the store's rules. If you're going to have extra masks for people so you can hand them to them if they don't have one, have those on hand. They cost, they just cost a few bucks to have a pack of spares on you, which I do as well over at ours. I always have a pack of masks in case someone requests that I put one on, or something similar,
Awesome. And of course, many of us have barely set foot in our friendly local game stores over the past year. Maybe we even discovered KeyForge within the past year and we've never set foot in our friendly local game store. So it can feel maybe a bit scary, the idea of going, hey, local game store, do you fancy running a KeyForge night? But, Zach, what would your tips on that be to essentially work with your local game store to set up a local and successful KeyForge night?
Yeah, so whether or not they're having one, you definitely want to be popping in and building a relationship with them, so that if you're going to be helping, they do trust you, whether that's the staff, or if the owner is like the one staff member, whatever the situation is. And if you can spare it, if you've got, if you've budgeted for, here's what I'm going to, spend on board and card games, make sure you're spending some money there, because that, with your time, if you pop by, once a week, once every other week, you pick up a KeyForge deck every now and again, you pick up the new Arkham Horror base set when it comes out. That's going to say that you're serious. Yes, I'm very excited about that, by the way. That's going to tell them that you're serious and that you're invested, and that if they do kind of help use you and your labor hours in putting an event together, that you are really want to help it happen. So definitely build that trust. If they're already running a KeyForge night, ask them how it's going. Ask them how I feel about it. Ask how you can help if you're happy to volunteer. If they're not running one, that's where I have a lot of tips, because I actually I have a key to the store on my regular keychain that I take everywhere with me to our FLGS, because I run the KeyForge night. I actually lock up at the end of the night. I can do sales at the register. And all that sort of thing. So that is, if they trust you, that is the kind of position they'll let you get into, where you can actually run the night of KeyForge yourself.
And if you don't have the keys, then you can't do any of the embezzlement. Oh, I mean,
Honestly, even if I had enough knowledge and skills to embezzle from a business, I'd have much better, easier targets than a board game store, because they're not.
True
They're
that.
not. They are works of passion and not of fortune. Is the impression I get.
They don't call you Ronnie for no reason, Zach.
Oh, that's true. Mostly because they don't call me Ronnie.
Nice save.
Yeah. So if there is not, here's a trick, and I believe, if I remember correctly, and Mr. Blake, Boulevard Paper Fight coach, can. That's all one person. If you don't know who he is, he actually, I think this was his tip a while back, is that if you have a laptop, so that's assuming if you have a laptop and you have a smartphone, you can gem the Global Event Manager. That is the software that it takes to run FFG's official chain-bound kind of mini round-robin tournament, where when decks win, they acquire chains that are only enforced at the chain-bound. So if you're bringing a very strong deck and you keep winning, you get more and more chains, and eventually your deck is a bit weaker and people should be able to beat it, is the idea. But if you say, hey, I'll bring in, like if you all have a laptop, or I can bring in my own laptop and my smartphone, and I can run the KeyForge night. Like we can, of course, set expectations. What do you want me to do? Is there anything special because of how you run your store? But I can run it for free. Now, this is a big ask. You are literally working for free just because you love a card game that somebody else is making. However, if you are as intense about it as I am, it does work. I have a great relationship with Sean, who runs the store. I've got his login, because you need the store's login to enter into the Global Event Manager and then run the KeyForge night. But it runs pretty smoothly. And once all of your regulars have an Asmodee account so you can get them logged, it really starts to run really smoothly, even if it's just you. And remember to lean on, if you have other people who are helpful, remember to delegate. That's something I'm not great at. But now I've got a few players who get there early. I'll open my bag and I will hand them the mats. I will say, hey, can you grab the table from the closet and set it up over there, for the laptop that's going to have the timer on it? Can you get the music going? So that's always to start to get it running yourself, really just the mechanics of it, to start to get it running yourself so you can actually just make the night happen at your FLGS. And I think the core to that is that relationship with the management, the staff of the FLGS. Make sure you get solid there, that they trust you, that you set expectations with them, and then that will just open up more possibility for you to help.
And for those that have maybe not heard of a chain bound before, or what is a chain bound and what does it take to run it? Does it have to be super official? Do you need the seal of FFG approval and the crown of the Archons, or can anyone run it? How does that work?
Well, it does take the crown of the Archons, but fortunately that lives in the heart of every person who opens a KeyForge deck.
That was... I haven't decided whether to rib you for that one just being absolutely vomit-inducing, or to be like, oh, that's so sweet. I think our audience will be divided 50-50.
Yeah, I do love to sow that dissension. So what a chain bound is it's the just kind of official game night format. It is officially a mini tournament, kind of Swiss or round robin style, for all the players there. So if you have 4 players, it's everybody's going to play the other person once. It's 3 rounds, so it really doesn't take that long. And you set it up in the system. You have to enter a few details that are pretty self-explanatory: date, time, Archon solo or sealed solo. There is an accessibility setting. If you have somebody there in an assisted mobility device like a wheelchair, you can actually set the number of people who don't have to move, so those people don't have to deal with moving themselves around a game store. So they've good shout there, FFG, getting that in there. And so a chain bound, it will run the tournament for you. Once you've got everybody scanned in, you scan their player profile QR, then their deck's QR, and you get them all scanned. It's got a timer built in. And so once you practice with it for like 1 or 2 chain bounds, it's going to be pretty smooth sailing. And then, like we said before, if you win at a chain bound, you get chains. which just apply during any chain bounds anywhere in the US, but not at any kind of higher level things. So it is official in the sense that it's connected back to FFG, even though you and the store are running it. And what I like about it is it gives a structure, and I think people actually end up playing more games than in a casual night where it's like, okay, I've just finished up my game, but Ed, of course, brought a Heart of the Forest Grump Buggy deck, and he has a big evil grin on his face. So, his game is going in a long time. Oh, I don't have somebody else to play. Well, let's play again, and then Ed's game finishes. What this does is it gives it a structure, a timed structure, where there's the set amount of rounds, and then it tells people who to go play, and people really enjoy the structure to it. An open play night is good if you're really trying to be intentional and advertise it as maybe a new player night or a place to just try out decks. That's totally fine. But I think the standard being a chain bound is a successful formula.
Awesome. And actually, yeah, in this example, Ed loses all of his friends by the end of the night because no one wants to play with him anymore.
In this example, Zach has a stern talking to with Ed because Ed should have known better than to bring Heart of the Forest to a casual chain bound.
Yeah, my double Heart of the Forest Brig deck is... It's not a fun one to play or play against, to be honest.
Right.
But,
right. Oh yeah, you're being serious. I forgot you have double Heart.
No, I do, right. And I have taken it to an event before, and really wished I hadn't. But that's a story for another day, Zach. And talking about decks, what formats are best in your opinion for a chain bound, for an evening chain bound? What formats work best? Maybe what are the different pros and cons of each?
Sure. And something I will specify here because it will matter in the words you're seeing in Gem is the format is either Archon or sealed, right? Bringing an open deck or bringing a sealed deck. And typically what you're just going to be running on these nights is some Archon solo where people bring one deck. They bring an open deck, they scan it in, and you play the decks that everybody brings and just a best of one, or sealed solo, where of course you open up a deck and everybody does that best of one around. It is my opinion, and I'll preface opinion because I think depending on how you do it and what your playgroup wants, you could get some variance here if you want to, but this I think is the baseline. Doing Archon and sealed, just sealed solo, for especially if you're on a weeknight and people have work either earlier in the day or the next day, keeping it to a simple Archon solo and sealed solo helps keep it simple. People don't have to worry about chain bidding, which is very much its own skill. I love adaptive, but chain building is its own skill that newer players will probably not have the hang of, especially if they don't know the entire card pool yet. Because remember, these play groups are going to be newer people. They're going to be people who just play on Monday and, don't even listen to amazing podcasts like Call of Discovery. So definitely keep that in mind. And I think sticking with Archon and Sealed is generally the way to go. But letting people know when you're going to try something like a reversal or an adaptive, or trying out Triad one evening, which you'd play less rounds, of course. That's my opinion. There is sticking with Archon and sealed solo is probably the best way to just get your scene growing.
And can you play around with it a little bit? Can you say, okay, everyone, we're only going to do decks from a certain set, or do you think just keeping the field open is the best way to keep that barrier to entry low for these kind of nights?
I think keeping it open is good. Although a set restricted Archon would be fun. For sealed, we always just pick one set to do interset play because it gets a little too complicated sometimes, or intra-set play, excuse me. But for Archon, we do just allow anything to come. But what I will say is that if you have a good / experienced player who you can talk to, and if they bring something that's just really powerful that your other newbies might not know how to deal with, or might not have the deck selection to really pick something to counter it, just make sure you set expectations, because what you don't want to do is your really good player to bring that deck every week and mop up the floor with everybody every week. Because, for instance, with Archon Solo, we run that every other week. So to get enough change to actually slow that thing down, you need at least 7 to 9 chains to really slow down, most good decks. And so that is 3 consecutive weeks of this person mopping it up at Chainbound. So, for instance, I had somebody who brought a very good Dark Tidings deck. He's a pretty new player, but a very good player because he's played so many other card games and he's got the brain for it. He brought this very good, very control-heavy Dark Tidings deck with Unfathomable and some other things, double Strange Ordination. And he wiped the floor. Midway through game 2, though, he looked at me and he goes, hey, I kind of realized this might have been a mistake to bring this deck. And so he and I were texting later, like, what, using SAS generally as a guide, what date range, goodness. Using SAS generally as a guide, what SAS range of a deck should he bring so that he can bring a slightly lower powered deck and just have a bit more of an even field where he can play hard, but be a little bit handicapped by playing, one of his weaker decks. So we kind of decided on a range. We're going to try to get around roughly 65, right? Not trying to find a gem in the rough there, but actually finding, a good kind of mid to low tier KeyForge deck to make that experience better for new players and just give them more of a chance at winning. People can handle losing, but if they can actually beat you, and the only factor was you were playing like a weaker deck, that still feels pretty good, and I think is a good policy if you can set up that communication with your experienced players.
Completely agree. You've got to and that comes back to making sure everyone feels comfortable and enjoys themselves ultimately, which is the key to a continuing successful weekly KeyForge night.
The heart of a weekly KeyForge night, you don't have a KeyForge night and you don't have KeyForge without people. So how the people feel, how they're enjoying themselves is really the key to it all. And it is about the overall experience. I'm saying this to myself as much as anyone else. Like if one person has one bad night, like that's not your job to fix, unless it specifically was like you messed up or something happened that you can say, hey, I'm sorry that happened. But if they're just having an off night and they go 0-3 and it's not really anybody's fault, like just remember you can't really fix that. You can give them encouragement, but you can't control whether or not people are going to come. You can just make the best atmosphere you can encourage good behavior in others, play with your cards upside down, and then just hope people respond to that.
Absolutely. And deck power level isn't the only leveler, is it? There is another handicap system implicit to Chainbound.
Yes. Now, the biggest point with chains is that, like I mentioned a little bit ago, it does take a while for really good decks to get those chains on there if they don't have them. Now, what you might be suggesting is somebody voluntarily add a few extra chains to their deck, which actually might be a halfway decent idea, because even if they win, they're still acquiring chains and the person across them had a better fighting chance. However, I will say, based on the deck that swept our previous Archon Chainbound, and my very sharp-minded friend Joshua, who's piloting it, when he looked at me, he said, "This is a very oppressive deck." I don't even think it's the chains on the deck, because it's a really oppressive, control-heavy, unfathomable deck. So even if that deck has chains on it, I think he will bring it back out. Once our play group is a bit more mature and our players are more experienced, and they have the tools to really sick it to him when he tries to play a super control heavy game.
Just on this, that formats and variants. So for me now, formats are something you play and variants are something you catch. I'd really rather that KeyForge
shout out to the Disney Plus subscribers
took the oh yes. Also, how good was Loki? Loki? Oh, that last episode. Anyone, listeners, you've got to watch Loki.
So spoiler free KeyForge joke about the last episode. The last episode actually showed all the KeyForge decks being generated around that final scene when that thing happened. That was the KeyForge decks being generated, if you can believe it.
It was worth it for the incredible monologue from the designer of all KeyForge. Was that Richard Garfield or was it just a variant? I don't know.
I actually that would be amazing if that character was a Richard Garfield variant. Anyways,
in the real world, maybe Richard Garfield. No spoilers. Okay, and Sealed, of course, has its positives for the local game store too.
Yes, important to remember. Having Sealed, we try to run Sealed. We run Sealed twice per month because that is getting decks out the door. And man, even if you're averaging 4 people and you get that Chainbound to Fire, that's still $40 in the store's pocket, and they get to move some product. So be sure to remember that. And honestly, it's not too hard to remember that because people love sealed. People want to play sealed more than Archon at this casual community level, I have learned. So I don't know if we will play sealed more often than we play Archon at some point. It also depends on what people are comfortable with. But yeah, that's a great boon. A great boon to playing sealed. Something related to that though is taking a group's temperature and talking to the FLGS about prize support. What most stores will do is what prize support is actually. If you're a future champion, you'll need to know this. Your store can purchase a box from FFG that includes 2 really nice playmats, a whole bunch of chain trackers, some deck boxes, all sorts of swag. And I know it will evolve and change in future boxes as things go forward. And they buy this box for some amount of money. I'm not sure how much. And it's enough to run a couple of chain bounds out of with prize support, where you can give the first place person a playmat. You can give everybody who participates a deck box, really just working with your store on how you want to distribute these. Typically what a store will do is add $5 to the entry fee for the event. So sealed regular would just be $10 for the deck, but $15 with playing sealed with prize support. And Archon with prize support would of course go from 0 to 5, or even if they're charging just for table space. But it would be $5 per person usually for Archon. So it's a bit higher stakes. I don't think we're going to implement it at our local scene for a few months until all of these new people, we're getting new people every week right now. But once we have a core of regulars who are regular 4 to 6 people who are showing up, are experienced players at that point, that's when I think we'll bump it up to a $5 entry for the prize support. One, because people do love prize support. That will get more people out there. So I think there is a point where you'd be missing out if you don't give away prize support. And hey, it's more money. It's more money for the store because they do end up making profit off of that prize support box. And the store will also know that people love prizes. These are playmats you can only get through prize support at chain bounds like these.
Awesome. And that stuff is still going? The swag is still flowing? Or has that stopped at the moment?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. To be perfectly honest, it may have stopped because I know they do 4 organized play boxes per year. So there's like one for each quarter of the year. And I don't know. My FLGS hasn't ordered more, mostly because we have been working off of one box from, I want to say early to like probably mid to late 2019 with a Bulwark playmat. So if you've paid attention to organized play, the Bulwark playmat is from a while back. And so we've still got one for somebody to win at some point. And it is an antique as far as KeyForge is concerned.
I love my Bulwark playmat.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
That's good. Yeah. So something to talk with your FLGS about. I'm not sure of the availability of those. If you're desperate and you have money to spend, eBay, they're on eBay. People are selling them.
Indeed.
Because of COVID.
And just thinking about new players here, you get a new player in, and there's always the risk that they're going to find themselves with a truly unfathomable deck. And I don't mean a deck with House Unfathomable, but I mean one of those super duper thinky KeyForge decks that maybe doesn't lend itself quite so well to new players. So what can you do to alleviate some of those things, or perhaps you're playing Archon and, Steve or Johnny has brought the super strong beatdown deck, and you need the new player to have something that they find easy to play, but something that could also stand on its own 2 feet against this beatdown deck.
Yeah, of course. For Archon, for new players, I like to have loner decks. I have a great call of the Archons deck that it doesn't have any doubles, so it's got some variance. However,
whoa, Zach, you're not calling new players loners. Do you have newbies walking? You're like, loner.
no, loaners as in decks I can loan to them.
Okay.
Decks I can hand to the lovely people who come into the board game store. And I have one deck in particular that is great for that because it's quite powerful and it has some wacky cards in there, but it's quite a powerful deck. And so as long as the new person is comfortable going ahead and playing in a chain bound, and if that's the case, then I usually like to sit back and TO, especially if I'm the odd number, right? Like there would be 5 players, but I can step out, and that way I can just help and coach them a bit as they play this deck. So just look for one in your collection. Probably Call of the Archons is going to have slightly less complicated choices and be a little more straightforward for a new player. Find one with some steel, so they've got some experience of what amber control feels like. Maybe some Untamed in there. I know the one I use for people is Dis Logos Brobnar. I had somebody pull off a King of the Crag, Collar of Subordination, really silly play in his first game against me, where his eyes just lit up, and I'm like, "Aha! I got you."
It's that moment. They're going to be an Archons Anonymous before they know it.
They realize these are suboptimal cards, but they're in this deck because they have to be. And I have an amazing play with suboptimal cards that will win me the game. Like, that was what was going through his head, and it was absolutely beautiful.
Has he come back since?
Yes, he came back a few times. That was pre-pandemic. I do know he's got some just busyness in life where he wants to come back, and as soon as he can, I think we'll have him back.
Awesome.
And to cover the other, just to quickly to cover sealed, I think the expectation to set there, one is just, hey, it's sealed. You could get something totally wacky. And I think if somebody is understanding what KeyForge is about, even if their deck's a little confusing, they're going to love that sense of discovery if they know that's what they're jumping into, right? And I think the other thing is set selection. Age of Ascension is great for learning to play on. Now, sometimes the players won't feel like they have as much agency if their amber control is super low or non-existent, but Age of Ascension is a pretty solid set for a young play group to really cut their teeth on. And the others are good too. Call of the Archons is fine. I'm really excited about trying Worlds Collide soon with some of the new players. However, with new players, avoid Dark Tidings. It is very complicated to play. The games slog on a lot, and matchups where one person really has control of the whole game the whole time aren't terribly uncommon. So avoid Dark Tidings Sealed if you're a bunch of new players. Wait until your new players go, actually, I do kind of enjoy these cool Dark Tidings things I've seen. Can we do Dark Tidings? And then jump in.
Yeah, that's a good point. And of course, when you're playing with just one set as well, the number of mechanics are generally lower that new players are going to come up against. The number of houses and number of play styles are going to be lower, which aids learning to a certain extent, even in the event that it's a Dark Tidings deck. I'm sure people can push new players over the line to a certain, once again, to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is that if you are the champion for this play group, right? And you know that maybe you have, so we're a college town. If you've got college kids who might be on a budget, or somebody who you just know is in between jobs because of COVID, but still wants to come out to play with like their 1 or 2 decks, and you tactfully have a chance to offer to cover them for sealed, just like figure out if there's a way you can do that. You might have somebody else in your play group who offers. Just be aware of that, right? Like, you don't want to insult anybody's pride or dignity, but also just like have that available if the only difference between somebody playing is like, well, I don't really, like, money's a bit tight, I don't want to spend the $10. Just be ready to tactfully, lovingly maybe take care of that, and that will help your play group and show somebody that you really care, right? Because decks are only $10. If you're in a position to be able to just have a little bit of money set aside to say, here's what I'm going to use to cover people, even a newbie, say, hey, I'll cover you, right? Don't even make it about whether it's financial need or not. Just say, oh, hey, I'll cover you today. Like, I got you. So just so you can play, like, just have a mind towards that. It has to be done carefully. It has to be done tactfully. I can't really go over how complicated people feel about money here on Call of Discovery, right? But that's just something to be aware of.
What, just you and I on Call of Discovery? I feel very uncomfortable about money, Zach.
Well, then you've been uncomfortable for about 1.5 years out of your 2 years here, buddy. So I think you can take it.
I love it. Well, Zach, we've spoken about all of these things, and this is once you've got people in the door. And I think Steve on our episode 1, Building a Community, mentioned the phenomenon of sitting in a room, hoping people turn up, and sometimes they don't. So
Yep.
how to get people into the room? Do you stand on the roof of the FLGS with a megaphone shouting, "You must play KeyForge"? Do you run out into the road, drag people out of their cars and into the FLGS? Or how does this whole advertising malark work?
Sure. So there's a couple avenues. One is just word of mouth. If you're a part of board game groups, or go find board game groups, or you just see people around that board game store because you're hanging out there. If you have one other person, go play KeyForge at the board game store. People will see you. People will ask. And the other thing is back to that relationship with the management of the FLGS. If the staff is bought into KeyForge, then they will tell people about KeyForge. People are going to come and show up to play Magic. That's fine. But like our Sean at my FLGS is amazing at whenever somebody comes in and shows any inkling toward card games, he says, "By the way, we've got KeyForge every Monday night. It's a great time. It's unique decks. A deck's only $10. That's all you need to get going. It's a ton of fun." And I've gotten multiple people just from Sean telling people at the cash register about it. That being said, if your board game store is not advertising it, or you can put a poster together, try to put a poster up at the board game store. Maybe get little business cards made with information about your KeyForge play nights next to the cash register. On top of that, there's, of course, the internet. So just post everywhere on the internet the day before or the day of your stuff, and post there consistently. It just takes a couple of minutes to go across, local nerd KeyForge Discords, Facebook groups. Remember to ask permission if you're not the one like running a board game group. Just check with the admin. Say, hey, do you mind if I post this once about KeyForge to get people out? Go to places people are looking for things to do in your local physical area. Like I've gotten a number of players, some really great people, off of our local subreddit for my town. People just looking for things to do. Or I posted about the night as an actual post on the subreddit, and somebody said, "Actually, this sounds like a lot of fun. I might come out." So just post everywhere you can think of. Ask any other nerdy friends where they gather with other nerdy people locally online, and post information. If you have a link to the event on the store's page, or if you're insane like me and you made your own website for your local playgroup, athensforgemasters.com. If you've done that, then point people to that. But just posting it everywhere consistently is really the best thing to do, alongside just talking to people in person. And then just pray that FFG remembers to market their game at some point.
Nice little dig there. Nice little dig.
Yeah. They earn it about once a quarter here on Call of Discovery. We like to be positive, but we don't like to hide in the bushes.
No, and we have to always caveat that with the fact that we're super excited about the future of KeyForge. The designers are hard at work, and KeyForge has a bright and illustrious future ahead of it.
It very much does. And I mean, that being said, I have seen some online ads for KeyForge that a bunch of us started getting about 6 weeks ago. So that's a great thing. And I won't repeat scandalous rumors from Italy. But if the scandalous rumors from Italy are true, then we should be getting some amazing announcements by the end of the year.
Well, we should be getting another amazing set by the end of the year, I think. Hopefully we'll get the announcement before that. Oh, goodness. With potentially a new house looming. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I also think I'm old enough that by the end of the year, at the end of July, is really not that long of a time when you're in your mid-30s like me.
No. And
I'm like, that's just a few weeks from now.
Even for young people like me in their late 20s, Zach, it's a relatively short space of time. And I'm just thinking, on a more somber note, for some people listening to this going, I just wish I had a friendly local game store. It didn't survive the pandemic. There are other locations that you can go.
Yes.
And I think ultimately, bars, restaurants, pubs, whatever you want to call them, places where people come together, are hoping that they can survive really in this new world. And if you give them an opportunity to have, even if it's 2, 3, 4 people coming weekly, that makes a huge difference to them. That's a constant source of income from a bunch of people that are going to sit quietly and buy drinks, or maybe not quietly, and have a great time. And board
They
game
won't be sitting
cafes.
quietly if they have forging noises.
Exactly. And board game cafes, which, it seems like is a more sustainable business model in some places for people that love playing games. A lot of board game cafes here in the UK run KeyForge nights, and even run KeyForge nights that don't run Magic nights and other games. And I think there's something to that, because KeyForge seems to appeal to a board game audience a little bit more than those other TCGs and CCGs. And certainly that's what we've seen here in the UK. And Sealed is an excellent, I think, format for those board game cafes, because they know they're getting a good source of income. It's often a very nice environment, and you can sit and have your dinner there at the same time as playing a bit of KeyForge, or you can have a drink or something. It normally works for everyone. Monday nights might be a dead night for them otherwise, and so you might find yourself a lovely space. So just because you don't have an FLGS in your local area, it doesn't mean you can't be a KeyForge champion. I know that our local board game cafe runs a chainbound event. They get the formality of a chainbound. So I'm not sure what that line is. I'm sure a lot of restaurants which have a few games there, you could probably end up turning that into a chainbound as well. I'm sure FFG will be flexible with you and helping you get something up and running.
That's a great point. And just to augment that, I know here in the USA, if you don't have like a restaurant that would quite fit right, if you don't have an FLGS, I know in the USA something like libraries have rooms you can rent for next to nothing or completely free. So you could have a room at a library that might fit your people, or a community center here in the US might be a place where you could do that as well. So definitely there are ways to get creative if you don't happen to have a friendly local game store in your area.
Bookstores are another one in the UK that hold gaming nights sometimes, and quite a nice environment for that. Really nice bookshop.
Yeah, sounds like
evening
it.
Smell of books, lovely. Okay, thank you so much, Zach, for sharing some of your tips and tricks. I think we're all a little bit out of the habit of turning up weekly to KeyForge nights or running KeyForge nights, and it's a good time for people to get started doing that again. Or actually, if you've never done that before, if you're not a KeyForge champion, get out there and do it. What's the worst that could happen? Really nothing. So give it a go.
Yeah, I agree. And this episode was just a lot of context for a lot of different points for tips and tricks that we both brought up. And if you have any questions, if you're trying to figure out your own unique situation, I would be more than happy to talk with you on across Discord or Twitter messages or over email, and just do some brainstorming with you to help figure out the best way to approach your situation to get a KeyForge night going. Or if you have any additions, things that I didn't mention about making people feel comfortable, making the night a success, definitely shoot me a message, and I will add it to the pile, and I'm sure I'll bring it up in conversation elsewhere and on future episodes.
Awesome. Thanks again, Zach, for sharing all of that. And our door is open, dear listener, if you want to ask any questions or get any Call of Discovery vibes for planning your local events. If you're enjoying Call of Discovery, please do subscribe on your podcast app of choice. If you're new to KeyForge, please check out the new player guide on Archon Arcana. It is the wonderful KeyForge wiki resource linked below, and it will help you get started on your own unique journey into this wonderful game. If you're looking to support us monetarily, please do visit our Patreon link below, where you can sign up to support us monthly and enjoy rewards like our exclusive Discord, where we get many of the topics and questions for the show. We've also recently started a new series of podcasts just for our wonderful Patreons, entitled Beyond Discovery, where we tackle some things that we just don't tackle on the main podcast. So definitely check that out and become part of the Patreon family if you are intrigued. Let us also know what you'd like to see more of or less of in future shows by interacting with us across social media And you can always send us an email at podcast@callofdiscovery.com. But most importantly, if you think a friend would enjoy this podcast, please do help them to discover it. Have you answered the call of discovery?